Tell them to stop. You are leaving this house tonight. I have done nothing! I have done nothing! Why are you doing this to me? Because you poisoned this house. That is a lie. Then tell them what happened to my womb. Papa, look at me. You know she is lying.
Nkoyo,
Please, protect me.
forgive me.
Papa, leave me out here.
Do not come back.
Papa?
Rain hit Nkoyo's back like stones as the men dragged her across the compound floor, her wrapper tearing against the gravel. "Please," she screamed, clawing at the gate post. "Papa, tell them to stop. I have done nothing." Mfoniso stood under the veranda roof, arms folded, dry, untouched by the storm soaking her stepdaughter to the bone. "Throw the witch out," she said, voice flat as a slap, "before she poisons this house the way she poisoned my womb." Ifyong stood behind his wife, jaw tight, eyes refusing to meet her daughters. "Papa!" Nkoyo screamed again, reaching for him through the rain. He turned his back and walked inside. The gate slammed. The rain swallowed her rest of her voice. If you've ever had someone you loved choose someone else over you, drop a comment right now and tell me who. And don't forget to hit subscribe because this story only gets heavier from here. 3 days later, Nkoyo sat curled under the awning of a shuttered provision shop on Marian Road, her stomach folding into itself with hunger, her feet blistered from walking without shoes. A hand appeared in front of her, holding a wrapped bundle of roasted plantain and fish. "Take it," a man's voice said, "before you faint and I have to carry you myself." She looked up into a face she didn't expect, young, unshaven, eyes steady in a way that made her chest tighten. "I don't need your pity," she said, even as her hands betrayed her and reached for the food. "It's not pity," he said, crouching to her level. "It's plantain. Eat first, argue with me after." His name was Asukuo. He drove a delivery van for a bakery 2 streets down, and for reasons Nkoyo couldn't explain, he came back the next evening, and the one after that. On the 4th night, he sat beside her on the concrete step, close enough that their shoulders touched, and said, "I keep thinking about you when I'm not here. Is that a strange thing to admit to a stranger?" "You are not a stranger anymore, Suko. You are the only person in this city who has looked at me like I'm still human." He turned her chin gently with 2 fingers. "You are more than human to me, Nkoyo. You are the first thing I think of when I wake up." Her breath caught. Rain began to fall again, soft this time, and neither of them moved to escape it. His lips found hers slowly, like a question he was afraid she'd refuse, and she answered by pulling him closer, her fingers curling into his shirt as if to hold on to the one good thing life had handed her. "I'm scared," she admitted against his mouth. "Every time something good happens to me, God finds a way to snatch it back. Then I will hold on to you tighter than God can pull." And he kissed her again, harder, like a promise sealed with teeth and breath. He got her the trial at Etim's bakery 3 days later. Etim, a stocky man with flour permanently ground into the creases of his knuckles, looked at her like she was a bag of rice. "You have never touched an oven in your life," he said. "I can see it in how you are standing." "Then teach me," Nkoyo said, chin lifted despite the tremor in her hands. "I have nothing left to lose, Oga, which means I have nothing left to be afraid of." Etim grunted and threw her an apron. "You start by sweeping. If the floor is dirty, the bread will taste like dirt too." She swept until her palms blistered raw. She burned the first 4 batches of bread so badly that the smoke set off coughing fit across the shop. Etim didn't shout. He simply said, "Again." And Nkoyo, teeth clenched against the humiliation, did it again and again, until one Tuesday morning, 3 weeks in, she pulled a loaf of bread from the oven that made Etim stop mid-sentence and stare. "Who taught you that crust?" Nkoyo demanded. "Nobody," Nkoyo said, breathless with something like joy she hadn't let herself feel in years. Etim's eyes, as hard as they were, softened at the edges. "Then maybe," he muttered, "the street sent me a gift and dressed it as a beggar." That night, Asuko pulled her into the narrow alley behind the bakery, flour still dusting her collarbone, and kissed her until her knees buckled against the wall. "I'm proud of you," he breathed against her neck. "Do you know that? I am so proud of you I could shout it down this whole street." "Don't," she laughed, breathless, gripping his shirt. "Mufoniso might hear you and come running to ruin it." His face changed at the name. "She will never touch you again," he said, low and fierce, "not while I'm breathing." He kissed her once more, slow this time, like he was trying to press the promise into her skin. Neither of them noticed the bakery's back window and the shadow of a woman who had been watching the whole exchange from across the street, a woman with sharp eyes and a phone already lifted to her ear. "She's found somewhere to hide," Mfoniso hissed into the receiver. "Small thing thinks she can build herself a new life. Let's see how long that lasts." 6 months in, Nkoyo's bread had a name of its own on Marian Road. People asked for Etim's girls' loaves before they asked for Etim. Arit, a wiry, sharp-tongued girl who'd walked the tail for 2 years, started following Nkoyo around the kitchen with a notebook. "Teach me that fold you do," Arit said one morning. "The one that makes the crust crackle like that." "Only if you stop stealing sugar when Etim isn't looking," Nkoyo shot back, and Arit burst out laughing so hard, flour puffed off her apron. From then on, they walked side by side, trading gossip over rising dough, and somewhere in the trading, Arit stopped being a co-worker and became the sister Nkoyo never had. "I used to think family was something you were born into," Nkoyo told her one evening, hands deep in a bowl of dough. "Now I think family is whoever refuses to leave when things get hard." "Then I'm not going anywhere," Arit said simply, bumping her shoulder, "even if Etim fires the both of us for laughing too much." Business grew fast enough that Etim handed Nkoyo the second oven to run alone, and customers started lining up before sunrise. Word reached a supermarket procurement officer named Okoye, who arrived one Thursday in a stiff shirt, clipboard in hand, looking at the shop like it owed him money. "Your packaging is inconsistent," he said, barely glancing at the bread Nkoyo held out. "Your certification is incomplete. I cannot recommend a small roadside operation like this to my head office." "Taste it first," Nkoyo said, voice steady, despite the heat rising in her chest, "before you decide what I am capable of." Okoye tore a piece, chewed, and his expression flickered, just barely, before he schooled it back to indifference. "It's good bread, but good bread is not enough. Fix your paperwork, come back when you are a business, not a girl with an oven." He walked out, and Nkoyo stood there, jaw tight, until Arit touched her arm. "Don't let him see you cry," Arit whispered. "Let him see you walk instead." That night, Asoko found her hunched over registration forms by candlelight, cross-referencing her gene certificates she barely understood. "I feel stupid," Nkoyo confessed, rubbing her eyes, "like the streets prepared me for hunger, but nobody prepared me for paperwork." "You survived Mfoniso," Asoko said, kneeling beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I love you, Nkoyo. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Not because you make good bread, not because you survived. I love the way you refuse to stay small." "Say it again," Nkoyo whispered, tears slipping down despite herself. "I love you," he said, cupping her face, "and he would keep saying it until you believed it the way I do." He kissed her then, deep and unhurried, like the world outside the candlelight didn't exist. She melted into him, forgetting the forms, forgetting Okoye, forgetting everything except the warmth of being wanted without condition. If this story has already made you feel something, don't scroll past without hitting that like button and drop a comment telling me if you think Okoye will come around. Mfoniso, meanwhile, was not finished. She paid a visit to the bakery disguised as a customer, slipping a folded note to one of the newer staff boys with instructions to misplace an order meant for Okoye's supermarket chain. An order that, if it arrived late, would confirm every doubt Okoye already had about small roadside operations. The morning of the delivery, Nkoyo discovered 40 loaves missing from the crates, replaced with nothing but empty baskets and a scrawled note. "Some people are not built for big things." She recognized the handwriting instantly. Her hands shook. "She followed me here," Nkoyo said, voice cracking as Arit read the note over her shoulder. "After everything, she followed me here to make sure I fail." Then we don't fail, Arit said fiercely, already pulling her sleeves up. We bake 40 loaves in 4 hours if that's what it takes. I am not watching that woman win. They walked like women possessed, their team silent and grim beside them, hauling trays, stoking the oven higher than he ever dared before. Nkoyo's arms burned, sweat soaking through her blouse, but she didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't let herself cry until the last tray came out golden and perfect with 20 minutes to spare. When Okoye arrived to inspect the delivery, expecting failure, he instead found 40 loaves stacked neatly, still warm, packaging corrected exactly as he demanded. He stared at Nkoyo for a long moment. "How," he said slowly, "did you manage this?" "Because giving up was never one of my options," Nkoyo said, chin lifted, exhaustion and fire both burning in her eyes. "Not when I was on the street, not now." Okoye closed his clipboard. "I'll speak to head office. 12 branches. If you can hold this standard, we start with 12. Nkoyo didn't celebrate until he'd driven off. Then she collapsed into Arit's arms, sobbing, not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of having carried something so heavy for so long and finally setting it down. The 12-branch contract changed everything. Within a year, Nkoyo's bakery had its own storefront on Marian Road, a proper signboard, and a line of customers that curled around the corner before sunrise. Arit ran the front counter like a general. Etim, half retired now, still came by every morning just to steal the first warm loaf off the tray, muttering that he trained her too well for his own good. It was Arit who spotted Mfoniso first, standing across the street, watching the shop with an expression Nkoyo hadn't seen on her before. Not scorn, something closer to fear. "Should I chase her off?" Arit asked, already rolling up her sleeves. "No," Nkoyo said quietly. "Let her come." Mfoniso crossed the road slowly, clutching her handbag like a shield. Up close, she looked smaller than Nkoyo remembered. The sharpness in her had dulled into something tired. "I heard what you did," Mfoniso said, not quite meeting her eyes. 12 branches, your name in the newspaper. "You came all this way to tell me you heard?" Nkoyo asked, arms folded. "I came," Mfoniso said, voice cracking, "because your father is sick. His heart. He asks for you every night, and I am too ashamed to keep telling him you will never come." Nkoyo felt the old wound flare, hot and immediate. "I threw you into the rain," she said, low and shaking. "You called me a witch in front of the whole compound. You tried to sabotage my delivery and ruin everything I built with my own 2 hands. Why should I feel anything for either of you?" "Because I was wrong," Mfoniso whispered, tears finally breaking through. "I blamed you for the child I could not carry. It was never your fault. I have carried that lie so long, it has eaten me from the inside, Nkoyo. I am not asking you to forget. I am asking you to let an old, foolish woman make one thing right before it's too late." Nkoyo stood in silence for a long moment, the street noise fading around her. Then she said, "I will come. Not for you, for him." Efik was thinner than she remembered, propped against pillows, his breath shallow. When he saw her in the doorway, his eyes filled instantly. "Nkoyo," he rasped, "my daughter, look at what you became without me." "I became it because you left me with nothing else to do but rise," Nkoyo said, voice trembling but steady. "I am not here to pretend the pain didn't happen, Papa. I am here because, despite everything, some small, stubborn part of me still loves you." "I was a coward," Efik wept, gripping her hand with what strength he had left. "I chose peace in my house over protecting my own blood. I will regret that until my last breath." "Then let your last breaths be spent trying to make it right, instead of drowning in shame that helps no one." Nkoyo sat with him until he slept, something in her chest finally loosening after years of carrying it clenched tight. That evening, Asukwa was waiting outside the bakery with a small velvet box he'd clearly been hiding in his pocket for weeks. "I watched you carry the whole world today," he said, taking both her hands in his. "The rain, the bakery, Mfoniso, your father, and you never once let it break you. I don't want to just admire that from a distance anymore, Nkoyo. I want to build my whole life next to it. Asukwo, she started, breath catching. Marry me, he said simply, dropping to one knee right there on the pavement, ignoring the small crowd already gathering with their phones out. Nkoyo laughed through sudden tears, pulling him up by the collar before he could even open the box fully. Yes, she breathed against his mouth. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted into cheers, and somewhere in the noise, Arit was screaming louder than anyone, filming the whole thing on her phone with tears streaming down her face. 2 years later, the bakery had expanded again. A training floor added at the back, where Nkoyo herself now stood teaching 2 teenage girls how to fold dough the way Etim had once taught her. One of the girls, thin and weary-eyed, reminded Nkoyo so much of herself that first week off the streets that it made her chest ache. "Why did you choose girls like us?" the girl asked one morning, flour dusting her nervous hands. "Girls nobody else wanted to hire." Nkoyo smiled, guiding her hands gently over the dough. "Because somebody once looked at a girl nobody wanted, gave her a broom and an oven, and let her prove what she was capable of," she said. "I am only passing that forward. One day you will do the same for somebody else." Outside, Asukwo pulled up in the delivery van, now painted with the bakery's own logo, waving through the window with their infant daughter propped against his shoulder. Nkoyo waved back, laughter bubbling in her chest. The same street that once swallowed her voice in the rain now knew her name, her bread, her whole rebuilt life. If Nkoyo's story moved you even a little, make sure you hit subscribe and drop a like before you go. This channel brings you stories like this every single week. And before you leave, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from tonight?